Catherine never spoke a word about the council snub, but she didn't have to. Her silence, deliberate and perfectly timed, became the loudest statement of all. She walked into a charity event alone, wore a dress impossible to ignore, and refused to sit beside Queen Camilla. Every gesture signaled strategy, not reaction. Behind the scenes, her exclusion wasn't just a snub, it was a calculated move, likely traced back to Sir Reginald Mallory's resistance to her growing prominence. If you love getting the real story behind the palace walls, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell so you never miss an update. His subsequent dismissal by King Charles was less an act of justice than an urgent repositioning. What's happening inside the palace isn't just about Catherine, it's about institutional survival. The monarchy isn't adapting gracefully, it's being dragged into the modern era by necessity. With Reginald out and a new advisory circle forming around figures like Princess Anne and Beatrice, the message is clear. Control is shifting, and it's increasingly female-led. But with covert leaks still tied to Reginald's camp, the shadows haven't disappeared. They've just been pushed underground. The next crisis may already be in motion. The cracks in the crown aren't subtle anymore. They are gaping. When Princess Catherine was excluded from a closed-door royal council, her seat left empty, visible, symbolic, it set off a storm inside the monarchy that no carefully worded statement could contain. The official explanation from the palace was a so-called scheduling conflict. But the moment that council image surfaced with her nameplate untouched and her chair vacant, no one bought it. It was blatant, it was deliberate, and it backfired spectacularly. Because behind that single act of exclusion sat a power play years in the making. And at the center of it all, Sir Reginald Molyneux, King Charles' long-standing advisor and the de facto gatekeeper of royal access and influence. If you love getting the real story behind the palace walls, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell so you never miss an update. He wasn't just whispering into the king's ear, he was filtering what made it to the throne at all. And Catherine? She threatened that filter. Her rise hadn't been loud or disruptive. It was quiet, composed, strategic. She wasn't giving dramatic interviews. She wasn't courting headlines. She was doing something far more threatening, building credibility, earning respect, and becoming a modern face of the monarchy that actually resonated with the public. For someone like Reginald, who built his entire career on preserving control through secrecy, that was a serious problem. Sources close to the palace began to confirm what everyone suspected. Reginald had orchestrated the exclusion. Not a clerical error, not a mix-up, a move, a message, an intentional attempt to freeze Catherine out of key decision-making. And it wasn't an isolated incident. It followed a long trail of smaller slights, missed briefings, withheld memos, unexplained delays, that, in hindsight, looked a lot like a quiet campaign to marginalize her role. But then everything unraveled. The internal backlash came swiftly. Reports of a tense, emotionally charged confrontation between Charles and Reginald began circulating. This wasn't a calm conversation. It was a breaking point. After years of reliance, the king made a rare emotional statement to Catherine, calling her like a daughter. A line that signaled a shift in loyalty, not just personally but institutionally. Reginald was dismissed soon after. It was a move few expected Charles to make. Reginald had been his right hand for decades. But his removal wasn't just about Catherine. It was about the monarchy catching up to a reality it had long resisted, that the old methods weren't working anymore. Still, the dismissal didn't end the problem. In fact, it exposed just how deep it ran. Because Reginald didn't operate alone. He had a network, a web of loyal insiders, silent allies, and backdoor connections that didn't vanish when he did. And not long after his departure, a bombshell dropped. A leaked letter from Catherine's private correspondence surfaced abroad. It wasn't just an invasion of privacy. It was traced back to a foreign shell company connected to Reginald's name. A network still very much active. Still watching. Still willing to sabotage from the shadows. That leak confirmed what everyone feared. Removing one figure wasn't enough. The old guard wasn't gone. It had simply gone underground. The palace, already reeling from the internal backlash and public scrutiny, found itself forced into reaction mode. And while Charles struggled to hold the institution together, it was Catherine who recalibrated the entire narrative. Without saying a single word, Days after the council scandal, she made her next public appearance. Alone. No Prince William, no support staff. Just Catherine, arriving at a charity event in a sleek black gown that instantly drew comparisons to Princess Diana's now iconic revenge dress. She refused to be seated next to Queen Camilla. She walked in with composure and purpose, and she said everything without uttering a syllable. The media exploded. The public rallied. Support for Catherine skyrocketed, and her quiet defiance became the story. Her silence didn't signal retreat. It signaled strategy. And that silence was louder than any press conference the palace could have drafted. Her return to public briefings soon followed. This wasn't just ceremonial involvement. It was leadership. Catherine was now being asked to lead public-facing royal briefings, a role that firmly placed her at the center of institutional influence. And she wasn't standing alone. Princess Beatrice and Zara Tindall began appearing alongside her, an emerging alliance of royal women stepping into visibility and power. It marked a shift. For centuries, influence in the monarchy flowed through male hierarchy and closed-room traditions. Now, the balance was visibly changing. Women weren't just playing supportive roles, they were setting the agenda. But this evolution didn't come without resistance. Sources inside the palace described rising discomfort among more traditional factions, those who had long operated under Reginald's structure, who viewed Catherine's growing influence as disruptive or premature. It was the usual language used to undermine powerful women without looking overtly hostile. Whisper campaigns, selective media leaks, all tactics recycled from the same old playbook. And yet, none of it worked, because Catherine, once again, didn't react. She adjusted. She moved forward. And with every public engagement, every partnership with an Beatrice, her presence became more permanent. But the leaks didn't stop. The personal letter traced to Reginald's company was just the beginning. There are quiet concerns within the palace that more information may be sitting in private databases, ready to be weaponized. Whether it's confidential documents, personal texts, or internal notes, the fear is that the remnants of Reginald's network could continue feeding material to foreign outlets or whispering into sympathetic ears. The palace is reportedly scrambling to implement tighter cybersecurity protocols, but that only addresses part of the problem. The larger issue isn't digital security, it's internal loyalty. And after Reginald's abrupt dismissal, those loyalties are more fractured than ever. Meanwhile, King Charles is caught in the middle. His health, never explicitly discussed, remains a quiet concern, especially given the stress of recent months. His attempt to walk the line between legacy and reform has grown increasingly difficult, especially with William's fury still hanging in the air. William's outburst after Catherine's exclusion was not just personal, it was generational. His confrontation with Charles marked a breaking point. This wasn't a disagreement, it was a challenge to the very fabric of palace operations. He accused his father of betrayal, not just to Catherine, but to the future of the institution. And that's what this all comes down to, the future. The monarchy stands at a crossroads. One path clings to the traditional power brokers who rely on secrecy, hierarchy, and internal control. The other recognizes that public trust, modernization, and authentic leadership aren't optional anymore. They are necessary. Catherine has become the face of that future, and every attempt to sideline her, sabotage her, or leak her private words only reinforces the fact that she's the one actually driving change. The public sees it. The press sees it. And now, so does the institution, though it's still figuring out how to respond. The stakes are high. Reginald may be gone, but his shadow lingers. His network, his methods, and his allies still pose a risk. And with every leak, every whisper, the monarchy's fragility becomes harder to deny. Whether Catherine's strategic silence can hold against that level of internal resistance is still unknown. But what's clear is this: she's not backing down. She's not waiting for permission. And she's no longer just playing the role of royal consort. She's reshaping the role itself. If you've made it through this chaos with your jaw still on the floor, you're not alone. What's your take? Does Catherine represent the future of the monarchy, or is the old guard still pulling more strings than we realize? Hit that like button if you've been following every twist. Drop a comment below and let's talk about the mess. And don't forget to subscribe. We'll be here, breaking down every leak, every power move, and every royal misstep as it happens. Because the crown may be polished, but the drama underneath, still royally chaotic. And if the drama underneath is any indication, this isn't just a passing storm, it's a full-blown reckoning. When King Charles dismissed a Reginald Moriarty, the ripple effect wasn't just felt in Buckingham Palace. It exploded across the entire monarchy. It was the kind of moment that shatters illusions. Because for years, Reginald operated like the monarchy's firewall, controlling narratives, restricting access, and keeping people like Catherine strategically at arm's length. His departure didn't just end a career. It exposed the entire system he helped build. That system didn't collapse overnight, but the damage is visible. And the biggest question now, whether the monarchy can survive the fallout of its own internal sabotage. Let's be honest, this wasn't just about excluding Catherine from a meeting. That empty chair wasn't an accident. It was a message, one that said, "You're not welcome here. Stay in your place." But what Reginald, and the traditionalists backing him, underestimated was just how loud that silence would be. Because Catherine's absence was noticed, not just by the press, not just by royal watchers, but by the public. And in 2025, public perception is power. The palace tried to contain it with a vague excuse about scheduling, but no one bought it. When someone of Catherine's stature is left out of a major council, and the seat with her name sits there, vacant, untouched, undeniable, it's not a scheduling issue. It's a strategy, a failed one. And the second it became public, the monarchy lost control of the narrative. Charles may have acted fast by confronting Reginald, but that confrontation wasn't just a clash of personalities. It was a showdown between two visions of the crown. Reginald represented the old guard, discreet, rigid, male-dominated, and reliant on secrecy. Catherine, by simply showing up and commanding respect without demanding it, represented something far more disruptive: modernity, empathy, and actual influence that wasn't filtered through male intermediaries. So when Charles told Catherine she was like a daughter to him, and followed that with Reginald's dismissal, it wasn't just emotional. It was political, a clear pivot, but one that came too late to avoid the cracks already forming within the palace. Because while Catherine maintained her trademark composure, the institution itself began to visibly split. William's response was instant and unfiltered. Reports of him storming into Clarence's house weren't exaggerated. He was livid. His wife, arguably the most popular member of the royal family, had been deliberately excluded. And for what? Internal politics? A turf war? That confrontation between William and Charles wasn't just father and son having it out. It was a generational earthquake. William wasn't just defending Catherine. He was drawing a line in the sand between the monarchy he is expected to inherit and the one currently imploding under its own outdated systems. And then Catherine made her move. She didn't release a statement. She didn't do an interview. She went to a charity event, alone, wearing black, refusing to sit next to Camilla. No one had to interpret that moment. It was the interpretation. It was visual resistance, styled with precision. A callback to Diana's most iconic moment. Yes, but also a message. I will not be sidelined. And I don't need to speak to make that clear. That's when the energy shifted. The public wasn't just sympathizing. They were choosing sides. Catherine's grace under pressure, her refusal to lash out, her silent strength, all of it resonated. She wasn't portrayed as dramatic or bitter. She was viewed as dignified, unjustly treated, and above the pettiness swirling around her. And the palace? Backed into a corner. That's how Catherine ended up leading briefings. Not in private. Not quietly. Publicly. In full view of the world. It wasn't a reward. It was an emergency recalibration. The institution needed her. Not because she demanded power, but because without her, the monarchy's relevance was slipping by the second. But what no one was prepared for was how quickly she embraced that role, and how effectively. She didn't just show up to talk about royal duties. She started reshaping how the monarchy communicates. She brought in trusted allies, Princess and Beatrice, Zara, women with real credibility, real work ethic, and absolutely no patience for palace games. Together, they started building something the monarchy hasn't had in years: visible, consistent female leadership. And that terrifies the people who once controlled everything from shadows. Because Reginald might be gone, but his playbook is still in circulation. That leaked letter from Catherine's private correspondence wasn't just an invasion. It was a shot across the bow. Traced back to one of Reginald's shell companies, it confirmed what palace insiders already feared, that his network is still active, operating discreetly, strategically, waiting for the right moment to strike again. This wasn't a one-time betrayal. It was a warning. And it puts the monarchy in a dangerous place. Because if Catherine, arguably the crown's most stabilizing figure, can be targeted, leaked on, and manipulated even after the king's public support, what does that say about the strength of the institution? It says the walls are thin, the loyalty is fraying, and the control? Fragile at best. Now Charles is stuck. His health remains a quiet concern. His authority, while intact, is clearly under pressure. He tried to balance both worlds, tradition and reform, but the palace isn't a place of middle ground anymore. He either moves forward with a new order or risks losing everything to the ghost of the old one. Catherine's influence has only grown in the meantime. She isn't asking for headlines. She's not grandstanding. She's working, showing up, leading. And the more she does, the harder it becomes for anyone to justify the kind of power hoarding Reginald built his career on. But there's still a danger in all of this, because the resistance hasn't stopped. It's quieter now, more careful, but it's still there. The same people who tried to exclude her from the council, the same ones feeding anonymous tips, the same hand behind the leak. They are watching, waiting, hoping for a misstep. But Catherine isn't giving them one. She's not retreating. She's relining. And the palace, like it or not, is being dragged along with her. This isn't just about reform. It's about survival. The monarchy is shifting from top-down hierarchy to something it's never been before, collaborative, responsive, even, dare we say, relatable. And at the front of that transformation is a woman who was once told to smile, wave, and stay quiet. She's still smiling. She's still waving. But she's no longer quiet. So now we wait to see whether the old power brokers will keep clawing at control, or finally concede that the future doesn't belong to them anymore. And the truth is, that future's already started. And that battle, it's messier than ever, because the deeper this royal fracture goes, the clearer it becomes that Catherine's rise isn't just a matter of popularity or image. It's a direct challenge to how things have always been done inside the palace walls. And the people most rattled by that, they are the ones who've always thrived in the shadows. The ones who built their careers protecting tradition, maintaining silence, and keeping the monarchy's most powerful women peripheral. That model doesn't work anymore. Catherine's response to being sidelined wasn't just a classy comeback. It was an operational reset. She didn't break down. She didn't lash out. She repositioned herself. That charity event in the black gown, that was the turning point. That wasn't fashion. It was strategy. It was a message. I won't be erased. And I don't need permission to show up with power. And that message landed. With the public, with the press, and, most inconveniently for the palace, with a staff who's still aligned with Reginald's legacy. Because now, Catherine isn't just back at the table. She's part of the leadership. She's not passively smiling from the sidelines. She's steering briefings, making decisions, choosing her team. And the optics? They are undeniable. When Princess stands beside Catherine, it's more than family support. It's institutional weight. When Beatrice and Zara step in as trusted allies, it's not a photo shoot, it's infrastructure. And for the first time in years, we're seeing monarchy shaped not just by protocol, but by the competence of the women who've always been there, but were never allowed to lead. Of course, not everyone inside the palace is on board. Behind the scenes, there are still loyalists quietly undermining this shift. Not openly, but through whispers, subtle media briefings, carefully chosen words and background quotes, designed to paint Catherine as overreaching, ambitious, or too visible. The kind of language always reserved for women who get too close to actual influence. It's a tactic, and it's old, but it's not working like it used to. Because for every attempt to dim Catherine's light, the public response only burns brighter. She doesn't need to defend herself. The people are doing it for her, and that's a power that scares the institution the most. She's not just admired. She's trusted. And in an age of scandal fatigue and royal skepticism, trust is everything. Which brings us back to the leak. That letter, traced to Reginald Shell Company, wasn't just a data breach. It was a test. A reminder that while the figurehead is gone, his methods aren't. His network still lingers. And the intent behind the leak? To rattle her. To control the narrative. To throw her off balance just as she was regaining her footing. But it didn't work. Instead of retreating, Catherine pushed forward. She tightened her circle, elevated the women she trusted, and stepped into visibility with even more precision. No message statements. No reactionary damage control. Just composure. It was a kind of response that made the leak look not just desperate, but small. And now, the palace has a decision to make. Not just about optics, but about survival. Because this isn't about family dynamics anymore. This is about whether the monarchy can evolve in real time, or whether it'll let itself be dragged backwards by the weight of its own fear. So as Reginald's shadow continues to linger, and as Charles tries to hold together a fractured inner circle, Catherine is quietly proving what real leadership looks like in 2025. Not loud, not flashy, just consistent, steady, and grounded in purpose, not performance. If you're still with us, you already know this story is more than tea and tiaras. So drop your thoughts in the comments. Has the monarchy finally turned a corner, or is a real battle still ahead? Hit that like button if you're watching this slow-motion power shift unfold. And subscribe. We're not even close to the end.